everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm Diane, and today I'm going to show you one way to paint a colourful cockerel or rooster in a loose style. This is a subject I love to paint because you can really break all the rules about colour and have fun playing with strong colours like phthalo blue, dioxazine violet and Winsor green. I'm doing a simple sketch here working from a photo on my iPad. And I'm drawing it lightly with my HB propelling pencil, which I quite like using as it's always sharp. I realise drawing isn't everyone's thing, and so if you want to, you can download a copy of this sketch from my website at dianeantonestudio.com for free. So I'm using a piece of Fabriano Artistico 140 pound knot watercolour paper with a medium texture. It's about 10 by 14 inches in size, and I haven't taped it down as I'm not painting wet in wet. It isn't really necessary to tape your paper down when you're not painting wet in wet, because we do that to stop the paper buckling so much when you get a lot of water on the paper. So in this case, it's not really needed. You can use any type of watercolour paper for this painting, although I don't recommend hot pressed because the texture of hot pressed watercolour paper is very smooth and the paint moves differently on smooth paper. The effect you get can be very interesting on hot pressed paper, and it has its place, but it isn't what I'm aiming for here. I'm using my big messy palette today for this painting, which is a large white, what we call butcher's tray, a white plastic tray, and it contains all the colours I ever use, a total of about 30 different colours. I never use all of them in one painting, and for this one I used about 9 or 10 different colours. I often start my paintings with an area of wet in wet, but today I've decided to start this painting wet on dry. So I've mixed up transparent yellow with a bit of quinacridone gold, and I'm just laying that in roughly over the body and the neck of the bird. My next colour is a Winsor violet mix, which I'm using to indicate the darker underneath area of the bird. And now I'm dropping in a little bit of Winsor green before thinking about the background. It's always a good idea to keep the background in mind while you're painting the subject of the painting, and not to do it as a last minute thing when you've actually finished, because really the background can sometimes make a painting. I've decided to use cobalt blue, which is going to give an indication of sky and a little bit of shadow behind the bird. So I'm just roughly laying in some random strokes of cobalt blue, which is a lovely soft blue colour. I use it a lot. It gives a very good effect and supports the rest of the painting. And I'm just coming in with a bit of water here and just generally making a very loose indication of the sky behind the bird. And now I'm doing a little bit of spatter. At this early stage, this is just to really break up the white of the paper. Again, so that I can keep the whole picture in mind as I carry on. You can see me testing the colours in the screen shot. I always have a rough piece of paper beside my palette so that I can test the colour I'm mixing before I use it to make sure the strength and the mix are right. The next few strokes are going to be done using dry brush technique, which is a technique for indicating things like feathers. I've mixed a greyish green and I'm applying it now with the side of my big round brush, just where the rooster's wing feathers sit, leaving plenty of the transparent yellow showing through. Now I'm softening some of the strokes with plain water and getting the paper ready for a little bit of wet in wet. I've mixed up a bright green with quinacridone gold and phthalo blue, and I'm indicating a few of the tail feathers here, and then some olive green, and I'm going to come around the body to give a little bit more shadow and shape. I very rarely use a colour straight from the palette. I always mix the colour before I put it into the painting, even if I just add a little bit of the complementary to grey it down a little bit or to liven it up a bit, because paints used straight from the tube just don't give the right sort of effect. Having got this far, we've got most of the body of the bird roughed in. Now's the time to actually go for the focal point of the bird, which is the bright red face and the wattle and comb. I usually use cadmium red for the undercolour in the comb and the wattle and the face, which is what I'm doing here. A good strong mix of cadmium red. And then once I've got that blocked in, I'll come back with some alizarin crimson, which is a darker bluish red, in order to put the shadows in. Sorry about my hand getting in the way there. This is the alizarin crimson. When I'm doing the legs on any kind of bird, especially a chicken, I often just take a wet brush and draw the colour from the body down into the leg areas, which gives a more harmonious look. I always keep the legs very simple, but it's good to remember the characteristic features such as the spurs, which are so typical of a cockerel, and the fact that the feet are surprisingly large in comparison to the rest of the bird. Now I'm going back to the body to add a bit more shading and shaping, using a greyish mauve colour to indicate the feathers, and some green as well. And here I'm just using the thirsty brush technique to lift out some of the colour, which I'm feeling is a little bit too bright just there, so just knocking that back a little bit. And now for the interesting bit, the fun bit is painting in the tail feathers. So this is phthalo blue with a bit of quinacridone gold to give a nice bright green and blue. You can choose any colours you like as long as they're bright. And I'm using the same large round brush. Sometimes I use one of my Chinese brushes, which also has a good effect, but here this is just a plain old round. And now I'm bringing some of these darks into the other parts of the bird just to keep the balance right and to highlight some of the lights. When you put a dark colour next to a light colour, the whole thing pops a lot better. Now I've got most of the bird in place, so I've gone back to the neck and the head, and I'm going to use quinacridone gold with a bit of transparent yellow to indicate the neck feathers, which are quite bright yellow. And suddenly you realise the bird needs something to stand on. So with another very light wash of cobalt blue, I'm going to indicate the ground beneath him. A little bit of shadow there, just to show that he's actually standing on something. Back now to the head, and with alizarin crimson and a bit of cobalt blue, I've mixed a dark red, which is going to give form to the wattle and comb by putting shadow into the darker parts. And a bit more spatter, using my rigger, which gives a finer splatter effect than the big brush I used earlier on. And time now to put in the eye. I like to use a waterproof pen to do the eye of the rooster because it's a very simple eye. So just basically a dot and a circle, and then outlining the beak and giving him some toenails, another important feature of a bird. And then shortly I'm going to just leave this painting for a while for it to dry completely. It will always dry a little bit lighter than how it is when it's wet, and for the final touches we need to have the whole painting completely dry so we can assess it tonally. Okay, so now the painting is dry and I'm coming in to add the final touches. The darkest darks to give better shape to the head, using alizarin crimson and a little bit of cobalt blue to make a very dark purpley colour, emphasising the shadows on the comb and the wattle. Always making sure that there are no hard lines where you don't want them by just softening the edges. Technique's called Lost and Found and is a great thing. I should do a tutorial on that sometime, using lost and found edges. A bit more work on the background, which I decided to keep really light and simple, so just a few more strokes of cobalt blue and a few more spatters to give a bit of life. I find that the simplest backgrounds are often the best. A little bit more green and violet to add some more texture to the wings and to indicate a few more feathers. I'm doing this with the rigger, which is a nice long brush which gives a loose calligraphic effect, which is very effective for birds. A little bit of shadow on the legs, and I think we're going to be pretty much done. If you've enjoyed watching me do this painting, you might like to give it a go, and as I mentioned before, the outline sketch is available for free on my website for you to download and trace at dianeantonestudio.com. The original painting's been sold, but prints are available from my website too. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this tutorial, and click the bell to get notifications when I post new content. I really appreciate you doing this, as being a very new channel, every single click counts. Thanks very much everyone for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Happy painting, and bye everyone.